It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Michael C. McDonald. Hey, Michael, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, nice to be on the show, Douglas. I very much appreciate you having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. Your bio sounds very interesting. You're promoting a book called From the Bench to the Boardroom. This is kind of a memoir of your life. You were a basketball player?
Yes, I was a basketball player at Rutgers University on the first NCAA team in 1975, and they went to the Final Four the year after I graduated in 76. So we went 22-7 my year, and then they went 31-2 and lost to Michigan and UCLA in the Final Four the next year.
Oh, all right. What position did you play?
I was a shooting guard. I was a very, very good shooter, but like the title of the book, I got to sit the bench behind three NBA players. Phil Sellers was All-American, Eddie Jordan, who coached for the Wizards in the NBA, and then Hollis Copeland, who played 3 years for the Knicks. So I had a chance to play with very good players, but I didn't get a chance to play a whole lot.
What was there any one particular game or particular incident that happened that sort of woke you up and said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to be a basketball star. I think I better do something else with my life?
Well, I was very fortunate to have, even though I didn't get to play as much, I got to know very successful coaches who taught me a lot about different things. I was recruited by Bill Foster, who was a coach at Duke and took them to the Final Four, who was a very good man, very good values, who, that's one of the reasons I wanted to go to Rutgers. But when I was going to go there, Bill decided to go off to the University of Utah, and they brought in Dick Lloyd and Dick Vitale. So Dick Vitale was my assistant coach for 2 years with Dick Lloyd. And I learned a lot from Dick about enthusiasm and really getting focused on what you wanted to do. And, then Tom Young came in. Dick left and went to Detroit. Tom Young came in, who was a very good disciplinarian, very good leader, very good communicator. And he was tough, very, very tough coach. And he came with Joe Boylan, another assistant coach who was a very good guy. So I had very good role models, and some were good in leadership, some were very good in communications. And then I had the good fortune when I went to graduate school to work for Jim Valvano for 2 years at Iona, who won the national championship in '83 at NC State. And Jim was a great recruiter, salesperson, motivator. And he taught me a lot about selling, which was a great aspect before I went into Xerox. Xerox, I was very well trained and they had great sales training and all that. But I learned more about selling from Jim than I did anybody, and that helped me a lot when I went into the business world. But the thing I think was important about basketball was you learned a lot about teamwork. You learned about perseverance. When you didn't play, you didn't quit. You hung in there. You kept fighting. You kept working hard. You did as much as you could. You had to be a team player. You had to be very disciplined. You had to study. Rutgers, where I went, was not a basketball factory. It was an academic institution. And to be honest, professors could have cared less whether you ever played on the basketball team. They expected you to do your work and get good grades. And, it was one of the good parts of the school. You really were a student athlete. You weren't, you were focused on having to do well. So I think I was put in a situation where even though I had three coaches over the 4 years I was at Rutgers, I got a lot of good background from each one of them, and I was smart enough to take good attributes that each one had and really try to learn from them.
When you started at Xerox, was it still kind of the old school authoritarian type corporation?
Actually, it was in a transition. When I got to Xerox, okay. It still was a lot structured like the ITT under Howard Janine and the traditional corporation, which was really designed after the military model, the hierarchies and the layers and all those kind of things. But the thing that changed when I was there is they really started to focus in the late 70s and early 80s. I joined there in 77. They knew they were not being competitive with the Japanese, and David Kern was a very, well-known chairman of Xerox, came in from IBM, and he focused on leadership through quality. So really what he did was he moved us to, a focus on quality management, TQM, and really try to focus on customer requirements and listening to the customers and starting to change our processes to be more competitive. And when he did that, that sort of moved you away from that authoritarian model because you had a lot of quality teams. You had people working together across functions, and you really had to learn how to deal with the other functions and to listen and to collaborate, or you weren't going to be successful. So the company changed over that period, and he did a great job. In fact, when he came into the company in the early 80s, our copiers cost more to sell than what it cost the Japanese to make theirs. So they were killing us in the marketplace because their production costs were so much cheaper. And within a few years, he made us much more competitive, and we were able to, in big accounts in the United States, we probably had a 25-26% market share, which given the fact we'd started off with such a big price disadvantage, we were pretty successful. And I think that philosophy of leadership through quality and teamwork and those kind of things sort of changed us from being as hierarchical as other corporations were at that time.
Is Xerox still viable in the business world since everybody seems to have their own printer these days? Well,
I think it's changed a lot. Xerox, first of all, when I left the company, it was about $18 billion. Now it's probably about $3.5 to $4 billion. And they sold off a company that was worth $6 billion, a services company. So that went off and became its own company. Carl Icahn split the company in half when he did an activist attack on Xerox. But the reality is that the business changed. I mean, copying clearly was not like it was 15 years ago. Everybody uses digital technologies, and everybody does have their own printers, at home. And you really don't, even today, you don't make that many prints anymore. You basically read things on your phone and you delete them or you store them, and you're not making as many copies or prints. But it's still a viable business because it's still very profitable. You make a lot of money on the ink and the toner and those kind of things. So it's a declining business, but still a business that you can make a lot of money in. And still you have Canon is very big in the United States, and Ricoh and Sharp, and still Xerox at $3.5 billion is not small, but they've been under a lot of competitive pressures over the last 5 or 6 years, and market shifts in technology. But I still think it's a business you can do very well in if you execute well. And there's big printing companies and things like that still do work for large corporations and, require a different kind of technology than you have in your home. And that's a big area of business. That can be billions of dollars on its own, handling 500 or 600 of the largest printers in the United States. So there is opportunity there, even though it is a business that really has been changed due to technology.
Well, why are ink cartridges so damn expensive? Is that where they're getting their money?
Well, that's where they make their money. I think what happens is, it's like the old razor blade, right? You buy the machine that's $199, and all of a sudden you realize, it's $50 every time I buy a cartridge. You go to Staples and you have a heart attack. But the reality is that's the business model that Epson and HP and all these people have had for years, and it works for them. And I remember when I was at Office Max, and we did a huge business selling Hewlett-Packard cartridges in all the Office Max stores. And it was $1 billion business. So it's the opportunity in that is great, and they still do very, very well on the ink and cartridge side, and it is where they make the money, and that's where they price it. They want you to buy the device to use the ink. That's the strategy in that business.
Yeah, I just bought ink cartridges for my Canon. It was $25 for the color and black and white both, and I thought, this probably costs about 4 cents.
No, well, it's true. Well, one of the reasons that Xerox did pretty well back when I was there, when I was president, 2000 to 2005 time. Give you an example, I had a $6.5 billion division in the U.S., and we made profits of over $680 million. We had about 12% return, and I had at the time 50-something thousand employees. And the interesting thing was our multifunction devices did very well because we would go into big enterprises and tell them, get rid of your printers, centralize, like have 4 or 5 desks, use one printer. And we convinced a lot of corporations to do that, and they didn't need as many of the small printers because they realized those small printers were 4 cents.
Yeah, that's true.
And they started to consolidate to more 40 or 50 page a minute printers than using the small printers. So that was one of the strategies Xerox had, was to really we really weren't that big in the small printer business, but we tried to head them off by selling higher speed printers that were less expensive in a cost per page basis.
Let's zero in on your book a little bit. From the bench to the boardroom. There's one line here on your bio that I just want to read. It says, this book is for anyone who strives to be a better leader. What, in your opinion, is, if there is a one attribute of somebody who is a great leader?
I think the most important thing for a great leader is to have vision and then to have courage to execute. So you have to have vision of what you want to try to accomplish in anything you do, and then you have to have the courage to make tough decisions and do what needs to be done to make it a reality. And I think I've seen many leaders who, are pretty good leaders, but when it comes to really executing and making tough decisions, they sometimes have a lot of trouble there because it takes guts to do things, and it's not easy. I remember, I'll give you an example. When I was at Xerox back in 2000, Ann Mulcahy took over as chairman. She was a terrific CEO for 10 years, but you had to do a turnaround. We were in serious trouble. We had a guy from IBM who disrupted the company, and I had to go from 51,000 people in the U.S. to 27,000.
Oh,
because I had to reduce costs, so I had to call in 2,000 people into our headquarters building and say to them, look, a year from now there's only going to be 1,000 on you. And by the way, these are the things we're going to do for you. We're going to get outplacement. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to give you insurance for this. We did everything we could to try to help the employees, but we downsized. The company went from 100,000 to 51,000, and we saved the company, which at the time, the year before that, almost didn't have any money. And we were able, within 2 years, the employment went back up to 143,000 because we bought other companies. So we fixed the business and then invested and grew the company again. But when that happened, when I was running the U.S., I had 20 senior vice presidents. 7 of them had to go because they didn't have the courage to make the decisions to do what needed to be done. They were used to being in the Xerox that grew every year. When I started, like I said, it was $5 billion. When I left, it was $18 billion. It was growing every year. It was doing well. And, it's easy to be a good executive when things are going well.
That's true enough.
It's very easy. And by the way, many times, I had many years where, there wasn't a lot of stress because the business was growing. I had great salespeople, or people were executing and doing really well. When you really earn your money is when things are bad. When things are difficult, when you got to really step up to issues, where you got to, make changes, and you've got to have the ability to change, and you can't just sit in the same position you were in before. And, that takes courage. That takes courage, and to be direct with people. Not like I got congratulated by the people years later after I did that meeting, because you know what they said? A lot of times, Mike, people just make that announcement in the newspaper. You told us first. I called them in and told them before it was in the paper. And they appreciated that. They felt that, hey, it's not a good situation, but we've all been with the company. And, hey, I was there 33 years, so Xerox was my life. It was my family. And, it was a great culture. People cared about each other, and it was a great place to work. So, when you have those kind of things happen, and the funny thing was, a lot of guys I know left because they felt, hey, things are going to be tough. I want to go. We didn't give executives raises for 4 or 5 years because we were trying to save the company, and we even made the insurance benefits less for executives and made it higher for the regular employees. I stayed because I spent my whole life helping them make the place successful, and I wanted to continue to help make it successful because it was a wonderful place to work with a great culture, and we had some wonderful people that were there, and we had just gotten off to the wrong way with some leaders that came in, and we had to go fix it, and I wanted to be part of the solution, not somebody who quit. And I think that's one of the things I also learned from sports. When things get tough, you can't quit. You got to keep on going. Every day you got to get up and be motivated to do the next thing. And you have to have the perseverance to deliver the results and be able to handle the stress. And by the way, the stress at that point, and what I was under, it was very stressful to have to. It's hard to lay off anybody, but to lay off thousands is very stressful.
Oh, I'm sure it is. So you said 33 years at Xerox. You weren't CEO for 33 years. Did you start at the bottom and work your way up?
No. I started at Xerox as a sales rep and ended up as president of the North American Solutions Group, the largest division of the company.
Oh, okay.
So I reported directly to the CEO for 10 years. And I also was president for a couple of years of the Agent channel. I had Agent Internet Telebusiness. I did that first in general markets in 98 to 2000. Then I became president of North America for 4.5 years. And then I was the president of worldwide marketing for 3 years. So I was 10 years reporting to Ann Mulcahy, the CEO of Xerox, who was a terrific leader and did a very fine job with the company.
So your book, From the Bench to the Boardroom, is it out now?
Yes, it's out. It came out May the 25th. And it's all the proceeds, by the way, Douglas, of the book of mine go to the Jimmy V Foundation that I'm on for cancer research.
Oh, that's great.
So the proceeds will go to pediatric cancer for children, which is, as you know, Dick Vitale right now is dealing with cancer, and Dick has an event every year that he's on the board of the V Foundation with me, and we're trying to raise as much money to stop children's cancer as we can.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fantastic.
And that's really that's really the main focus. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was really to use it to help raise funds for the V Foundation.
So do you have a website you want to give out for the book?
Well, the book is on Amazon, so you can buy it on Amazon.
All right.
And it's also at Barnes & Noble, so the two biggest distributors. But Amazon is really the easiest to get it from. Target has had it on their website also. But it's a good read. 6 of the chapters are focused on sports, and 3 of them are on a Xerox turnaround that I did, and 3 of them are on MetaFast, which MetaFast was a company that I was on the board of while I was at Xerox, and my brother Brad was the CEO, and he was the chairman of the company, and he called me one day when I had gone to Office Max after I retired from Xerox. I had gone to Office Max as executive vice president. He called me and said, Mike, I'd gone to Office Max in August, and he called me in October and said, Mike, I got terminal cancer. I'm going to die in 6 months. Yeah. So I need you to come to Baltimore and take over the company. Now, I knew nothing about the diet business. I knew nothing about multi-level. I didn't know anything about consumer products. So I decided to, he said to me, Mike, I'm going to give you a great deal. I'm going to pay you 50% of what you make now in salary, and you're going to come to Baltimore. So I went to Baltimore, and I took over there in November of 2011 as chairman. And I became chairman and CEO in February, and then my brother passed away in April of 2012. So 6 months after he got the esophageal cancer, he died. And all of his money was invested in the company. The stock was about $12 a share, and the company was about, $300 million. Today, the company, I retired last December, and I hired a great young CEO, Dan Chard. The stock is now over 200, and wow. The company is over $1 billion.
That's great.
So, between 2011, so I do talk about, that whole turnaround of taking when my brother took that company over, it was only $7 million. He took it from $7 million. He was a great entrepreneur. Took it to $250, and then I made it a large company, and now they're one of the top diet companies and consumer products companies in that space. So there's a lot about the turnaround in MetaFast also to move it from a small company into and now the value is about $2.5 billion of the firm.
We got to wrap this up, Michael. We are out of time. Thanks so much for coming on. And
well, hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it a lot, and I wish you the best. Have a great holiday season.
All right. Take care, Mike.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve, the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. And you're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Tom Leihbacher. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Douglas. I'm fine. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So you're here to promote a book. Your book is called A Gift Most Rare, and it's your first novel. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why did you decide to write this?
That's a very interesting question because although I do a lot of writing for work each day, being in the advertising and media business, the writing I do is promotional in nature and sales in nature, so copywriting in nature. So it was kind of a interesting thing when the idea for a novel came to me. And in fact, initially I tried to kind of almost ignore it because it was just not something that I was used to. But the idea stuck with me. And so finally, after probably about a year of just trying to sort of let it go away, I decided to try to flesh it out. And to my very happy surprise, things just really began to flow, and this is what came out of it.
What genre would you put this novel in?
I would put it in the genre of Christian fiction. It's very
fiction.
G-rated.
Okay.
It's very family-oriented. It's very community-oriented. It's also a fun period piece set in the early 1970s and has a nice coming-of-age kind of a theme to it because the main character is a middle school-age boy, and it's him and his group of buddies, and just going through life and getting into the fun and mischievous things that we all tended to do back then.
Is this autobiographical at all?
It's not autobiographical in the sense that I attempted to base any of the characters on myself, but I did subject the main character and his group of friends to some of the same things that me and my group of friends did back in those days, and they do have some of the same experiences that we had when it comes to playing sports or with schoolwork or the nerve-wracking aspect of trying to suddenly begin to talk with girls and actually have relationships with girls. And so from that point of view, it might be slightly autobiographical because they do go to some of the places and do some of the same things that me and my group of friends used to do, but that would be about as close as it would come to anything along those lines.
You think it's easier for kids growing up now or back in the 70s?
Wow. I think that back in the 70s, life was sure a lot less complicated. Not that those weren't strange and difficult and complicated times, but back then it seemed like the emphasis was on family and community and friendships. And growing up, the things that really mattered were my friends, sports, and just being together and hanging out and doing things. Whether you were building a tree fort in the woods, or whether you were playing touch football, or whether you were walking uptown to get a sandwich and a Coke, it just seemed like it was a lot simpler back then. So hard to say, because I think, you look around at kids these days and you see a lot of them thriving and doing really great with all these additional options and activities they can be involved with. But I know that I enjoyed growing up back then, and glad that I have fond memories from back in the 60s and 70s.
Well, it seems to me there's a bit of an irony to the advancements we've made in technology, in the sense that the idea was that the internet was going to unite us all and unite the world and bring everyone together. And I think really it's had just the opposite effect. I think people are more distant now. I don't think people communicate in person as much as they used to. And I think that there's something gets lost in the human-to-human contact. I think it's very important for people, and I think we're diminishing that very quickly by texting everybody rather than face-to-face meetings.
Yeah. I think you're really right about that. I so remember all through the 80s, I would say, after I was out of college, each week you would sit down and write, lengthy handwritten letters to family and friends that maybe live in a different part of the country that you hadn't been in touch with in a while. And you certainly, had your list of people that you would send Christmas cards to every year. Now it seems like, you get these e-cards, which are very lovely, but not nearly as personal. And so, yeah, I think you're right. And, the other thing that comes to mind is sometimes it just flat out hurts my heart when I do go online and I read an article, and then you see at the bottom people that want to make comments, and the comments quickly, get into like, name calling and how can you think that, and you're stupid and all that. And it really kind of hurts my heart because, it's the tone that's out there just isn't very civil all the time.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different things going on with that. I mean, the political divide in this country is certainly the worst I've ever seen it. And now I grew up in the 70s as well, so you and I are, I think, around the same age. Mm-hmm. It was never like that. I mean, I knew people that were Democrats, and I knew people that were Republicans back then. And it wasn't as nasty. It wasn't nearly as nasty. People might disagree with things, but it's gotten so bad now. And the problem is that the technology that we were just talking about has amplified all of this division. Like you said, with the comments, and people will just comment about anything and say anything because they're sort of protected. You would never say those things to somebody to their face, but you can certainly do it online with the anonymity of the internet. And so I don't know. I don't have children, so
funny.
I don't have a reference point to if they're better off now than when I was growing up.
Just last night, I was having this conversation with my nephew and his fiance. We went over to my sister-in-law's house, and there was a nice little holiday thing going on. And we got into a conversation later in the night, and we were talking about this very thing. And I said to them, I think the big difference between politics back then, you referenced how our political situation is so divisive. Back then, there were differences across the aisle, so to speak. But at the end of the day, I think most everybody agreed government still had to work. And if in any given negotiation it was your turn to, win, and you might get 70% of what you were asking for, that was great. But then the next time, the other person might win, and so there was always compromise, and there was always I felt like a camaraderie even among people from different parties. Just last week, President Biden was speaking at the funeral of Bob Dole, and they were obviously from different political parties, but I think his words are very sincere in terms of the respect that he had, that they had for each other, and they worked together and they found ways to make progress.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Bob Dole and even Biden to some extent are sort of the last of the old school, and I don't see that happening with the younger set. I really don't. People draw a line in the sand, and that's it.
Yeah.
And my fear is that the government is going to just... I hate when that happens. See, this is what happens when you get older, right? This is a senior moment.
Well, it's like a zero-sum game that they're playing. It's like, all or nothing at all, and the result is gridlock and very little progress. And
that's the word I was looking for. Gridlock. I was going to say that. Just to finish what I was going to say that the government is going to gridlock itself into obscurity, where absolutely nothing will get done in this country. There's a great book out about this, where the government gridlocks itself to the point where it cannot function anymore and nothing gets done. And so the 5 big corporations like Amazon and Google and Facebook end up taking over power from the government.
Oh my God.
And it's a great book.
It sounds like a...
So people have to show their allegiance to one of these corporations, and it's a whole sort of dystopia kind of thing, but it's really good, and it's sort of grounded in a premise that is possible. So I always like books like that. I find those interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyways, so your book is called A Gift Most Rare. It's your first novel, and is it out now? Is it available?
It is. It's available on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com and iTunes and select bookstores across the country. It also can be purchased through my website, www.tomleihbacher.com. And there's a book trailer there, video trailer, and a bunch of reviews. And so, it's available, and it's doing fairly well.
Okay, great. You planning on writing any more?
Thank you for that question. As a matter of fact, there's a summer sequel that has been written. It's been edited, and it's actually in typesetting phases now, page formatting and typesetting. And so hopefully that will be out by springtime of 2022. And it's the same cast of characters, but they're 2 years older. And now, instead of being on Christmas break, they're on their summer break between middle school and high school. So it's a time of life when we were filled with fun and excitement about 2.5 months of summer break and all the great fun things we'd get to do. But lingering in the backs of their minds, there's a little bit of anxiety about how, come September, we'll be over at the high school and everything's going to change. But what I really like most about the sequel is there's a really good and I think a pretty timely anti-bullying message that sort of came from that. It was part of the story as I outlined it when I first got started, but then it just took on a life of its own, and it became like the central sort of a theme in the book. So it's like a fun summer read, and yet there's this anti-bullying message that I think is really good.
Well, we do have to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and best of luck with the book. The book came out how long ago, did you say?
It actually came out in October of last year. So, since A Gift Most Rare has a Christmas theme to it, it was very popular Q4 of last year, and it also, maintained visibility throughout the year. But there's been a nice surge again lately, and so I think it's going to have some evergreen appeal to it, and we'll keep this going.
Well, thanks again for coming on. Nice meeting you, and nice talking to you.
Thanks, Douglas. Nice being with you.